Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston. I'm NASA's Sandra Jones. You're looking at a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the team is ready and prepared for the upcoming arrival of the Northrop Grumman Cygnus 24 cargo spacecraft with over 11,000 pounds of science investigations, hardware, and cargo for the crew aboard the International Space Station. Teams here in Mission Control Houston are monitoring today's capture and berthing, and today's flight director is Heidi Brewer. You can see Heidi there in the center of your screen, and directly to her right is the Capcom, or capsule communicator, Ever Zavalia, who will be serving as the prime in communicating with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station during today's capture and berthing.
The Cygnus command panel LED status matches as expected. Our current pi range is 251 meters. For our first Block B, the light is within the corridor. We're unable to assess the vehicle size relative to the outline at the moment, but does look approximately right based on the light structure. The light is not offset from the circle, and the circle is offset from the center of the corridor approximately one vehicle width to the starboard side.
Jack, we copy all, and that's a good report.
And those communications from the crew on board the International Space Station, namely NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, as he reports out some visual and logistical aspects of where the Cygnus spacecraft is. Currently, Cygnus is about 250 meters away from the International Space Station and is in a planned hold period while the teams on the ground assess the positioning of Cygnus and ensure that everything is ready to go to continue its slow and steady approach to the capture point. Cygnus launched on Saturday, April 11th at 6:41 a.m. Central from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, supplies, and science for the Expedition 74 crew currently living and working aboard the space station. Following launch on Saturday, one of the 3 GPS systems on Cygnus was lost due to a blown fuse. There are 2 remaining healthy GPS systems on board, allowing for a continued approach to the International Space Station. This morning, NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway will be the prime robotics controller during capture. He'll be poised in the space station's cupola, ready and prepared to capture Cygnus with the Canadarm2. And following capture, the control will be handed over to the teams on the ground to install the spacecraft. And one correction to that, NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be the prime for today's capture, with NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway backing him up. In addition to NASA astronauts Chris Williams and Jack Hathaway, there are a total of 7 crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station. That includes NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno, Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev, as well as Sergei Kudzverchkov, who is the current space station commander, and Sergei Mikheyev, as well as NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who again will be backing up Jack Hathaway today. At this point, we are continuing in the planned 250-meter hold. We have about 9.5 minutes remaining in this estimated hold while the teams ensure that everything is expected and looking good before Cygnus continues its approach to the International Space Station. Once the go is given for Cygnus to continue its approach, another hold will take place at the 30-meter mark. And you are currently looking at a view of the Cygnus cargo resupply spacecraft on your screen. The International Space Station is currently in a night pass over the Earth. The International Space Station orbits the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour, so that means that every 90 minutes, the International Space Station orbits the Earth, and of course that means every 45 minutes a sunrise and a sunset is seen. So right now we currently are in an orbital nighttime, but we'll be approaching a daytime here shortly. The International Space Station is currently flying 267 statute miles above the Earth and approaching the northeast coast of Australia. On board Cygnus, as mentioned, is over 11,000 pounds of supplies and cargo for the crew on board the International Space Station. That includes over 3,100 pounds of crew supplies, 2,300 pounds plus of science investigations, 143 pounds of spacewalk equipment, over 4,600 pounds of vehicle hardware, and 727 pounds of computer resources. As part of this cargo resupply, there are a number of food items on board the Cygnus spacecraft, including fresh food items such as garlic, hummus, apples, blueberries, oranges, baby carrots, bell peppers, and radishes, as well as some safe shelf-stable food such as coffee, tea, coffee beans and dark chocolate, grape jelly, olives, salsa, candies, and beef jerkies for the crew to enjoy. Each Cygnus cargo resupply spacecraft is named after a historical and significant member of the spaceflight community. This Cygnus spacecraft is named in honor of NASA astronaut Stephen R. Nagel. Nagel was selected by NASA in 1979 and is a veteran of 4 space flights, including STS-51G and STS-61AA in 1985, as well as STS-37 in 1991 and STS-55 in 1993. Nagel has logged more than 723 hours in space. In addition to food and hardware, Cygnus has on board a number of science experiments, dozens of them in fact, that will be conducted during Expedition 74 and 75, including a new module to advance quantum science that could improve computing technology and aid in our search for dark matter, as well as hardware to produce a greater number of therapeutic stem cells for blood diseases and cancer. Cygnus also carries model organisms to study the gut microbiome and a receiver that could enhance space weather models to protect critical space infrastructure, such as GPS and radar. You're continuing to get a live view of the Cygnus spacecraft as it continues that 250-meter planned hold. The lights that you see on your screen there, the red and green lights, are directional lights. The red light signals the port side of the spacecraft, and the green light signals the starboard side. Inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, Heidi Brewer, flight director during today's shift, is polling her team to see if everyone is ready for Cygnus to continue its approach to the Keep Out Sphere, which is the 200-meter radius around the International Space Station. We are targeting an estimated capture at 11:50 a.m. Central Time this morning, just about 53 minutes from now.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Christian Jack. Cygnus and ISS are configured for approach inside the Keep Out Sphere. Expect approach to resume shortly and stand by for the Cygnus PCS command checkout.
And you just heard Capcom, or Capsule Communicator Evers Avalia, letting the crew aboard the International Space Station know that Cygnus has the go to continue its approach. We do expect to see Cygnus continue its approach and motion here shortly. And we did just hear the call out that Cygnus approach has resumed.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Christian Jack. Cygnus has resumed approach. Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout. Hold arm for step 3 and 1.102.
Copies. We see visiting vehicle mode of approach. High range is 245 and decreasing. We'll go for step 3.
NASA astronaut Chris Williams continuing to step through those procedures as he is the prime for capture today. He's being backed up by NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. Both are staged and ready in the space station's cupola. Cygnus now 235 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close in.
Houston Station, the hold command is armed at step 3.
Houston copies, hold command armed. Station Houston on 2, hold arm confirmed. Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout, disarm for step 4 in 1.102.
Houston Station, we'll go for step 4, Cygnus PCS command checkout, disarm and work. Houston Station, the hold command is disarmed at step 4.
Copy, hold command disarmed. Cygnus PCS command checkout was successful. Begin monitoring approach from 250 meters per step 5 in 1.102.
Cygnus continuing to close in, now 206 meters away from the space station. The next call out we'll hear is once it reaches the 200 meter radius known as the keep out sphere. Cygnus is now within the keep out sphere.
Station Houston on 2, Cygnus is inside the 200 meter keep out sphere. Crew now has the authority to issue an abort if no comm with MCC-H and the light is outside of the corridor.
Station copies. Houston Station 2 for Block Bravo.
Ready for Block Bravo.
On monitor 1, I see the light within the corridor.
unable to assess vehicle size relative to outline. The light appears essentially aligned with the circle, minimal offset. The circle is aligned with the corridor center, and that is consistent on both Monitor 1 and Monitor 3.
Houston copies. That's a good report.
And that report out from NASA astronaut Chris Williams, prime for capture today as he continues to monitor Cygnus's approach. He is poised in the cupola and monitoring the approach using a screen that, as you can see on your own screen right there, this is what the crew on board the International Space Station is currently looking at as they monitor Cygnus's approach. Hearing good call-outs from the team here on the ground that Cygnus is right on the money, smack dab in the middle of where it needs to be as it continues its approach, now 172 meters away from the International Space Station. And jumping back to the view of Cygnus from one of the cameras on board the International Space Station, you can see those navigational lights that correlate with the screen that Chris Williams is looking at aboard the International Space Station. The red light is the port side of the Cygnus spacecraft, and the green is the starboard side of Cygnus. We are expecting an orbital sunrise here in the next few minutes, so we should get some better views of Cygnus once the International Space Station reaches that orbital sunrise period. Cygnus now at the 150-meter mark away from the International Space Station, closing in with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, hardware, and supplies, as well as scientific research for the crew aboard the International Space Station. The SS Steve R. Nagel, named after NASA astronaut who was selected in 1979. He's a veteran of more than 4 space flights and has logged more than 723 hours in space. On board Cygnus is a variety of fresh food items, including hummus, apples, blueberries, oranges, baby carrots, bell peppers, and radishes, as well as some shelf-stable foods such as olives, salsa, coffee, tea, almond butter, and beef jerky, in addition to the standard menu items for the crew aboard the space station. Also on board Cygnus are a number of mission hardware items, including the European Enhanced Exploration Exercise Device, which is a compact exercise system that helps preserve muscle mass and bone health in microgravity. The crew on board the International Space Station exercises for 2 hours per day to maintain their bone and muscle health. The European Enhanced Exploration Exercise Device will enable a broader and more adaptable range of resistance exercises, such as cycling, rowing, and resistance training, in addition to the ability to perform rope pulling and climbing movements even when unpowered. On board the International Space Station, the crew currently has 3 ways in which they can exercise. This includes a bicycle, a treadmill, and a weightlifting device. Also on board Cygnus regarding hardware is the Supplemental Heat Rejection Evaporative Cooler, also known as SHREC, which provides heat rejection for the orbiting laboratory in the event of dual thermal control system loop failures. This cooler connects to the vacuum system and multiple onboard water sources to evaporate water through hollow fiber membranes. Another piece of hardware on board Cygnus is the Ocular Coherence Tomography, which is a non-contact medical imaging device that uses reflective light to produce detailed cross-section and 3D images to actively track the eye during imagery. Tracking eye movement with simultaneous dual beam imaging minimizes motion artifact, enables noise reduction, and allows the instrument to precisely track changes in crew eye health over time. This unit will replace a unit on orbit that has since degraded. A few more hardware highlights on board Cygnus include 8 hatch seal covers to be installed over current hatch seals, 2 batteries to support the operations of the Zarya module, 3 resupply water tanks, 1 nitrogen tank and 1 oxygen tank used for recharging spacesuits, and 1 pre-treat water dispenser, which is a spare for the waste and hygiene compartment on the space station. And on your screen there, you're starting to see the outline of the Cygnus spacecraft as it continues its approach, now 113 meters away from the orbiting lab.
Houston Station, vehicle is stable at 109 meters and closing. The light remains within the corridor. We can make out the vehicle now, and it matches the size of the outline. The light is not offset from the circle, and the circle is offset from the center corridor, 1/2 of the vehicle width port. And this is valid in both monitors.
And Jack, that matches expectations. Thank you.
As we approach the 100-meter mark, we do have an updated targeted capture time of 12:09 p.m. here in Houston, 1:09 p.m. Eastern Time. Cygnus continuing to come into view now that we approach that orbital sunrise. You are looking at the spacecraft there on your screen. The portion sticking out of the spacecraft is actually the solar arrays, which deploy about an hour and a half after Cygnus launches. Cygnus launched at 6:41 a.m. Central on Saturday from Florida and has been continuing its journey to the International Space Station ever since, now less than 100 meters away from the space station. The next milestone that we'll look for is when Cygnus will reach the 30-meter hold point, where additional system checks will take place. Following this, Cygnus will move to the 10 to 12 meter point, at which time the Canadarm2, which will be operated by NASA astronaut Chris Williams, will reach out and capture the spacecraft. Following this, teams on the ground will take over control of Cygnus and will berth or install the spacecraft at the Unity module of the space station. Following installation, the Cygnus spacecraft hatches will be opened tomorrow, and the crew will get busy unloading the cargo, research, and supplies on board, over 11,000 pounds in all. Cygnus continuing to close in towards our next hold point at the 30-meter mark. Cygnus is now 80 meters away from the International Space Station. Everything continuing to go smooth here on the ground. Cygnus and the International Space Station are flying over the North Pacific Ocean currently, approaching the northern tip of Hawaii. The International Space Station has been continuously crewed for over 25 years, meaning that humans have lived and worked aboard the International Space Station consistently that entire time, and cargo resupply missions such as today's Cygnus are critical to ensuring that that continues. Starting to get some even better views of Cygnus as well as the Earth below as Cygnus approaches now 73 meters away from the International Space Station. The camera views that we are currently getting from the International Space Station are from a camera outside the International Space Station, but the camera views and positioning of those cameras is operated from right here in Mission Control Houston by our CRONUS console. CRONUS stands for Communications Radio Frequency Onboard Network Utilization Specialist. In addition to CRONUS, we have a variety of other flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston today, monitoring the approach, including our robotics officer, who will be key for maneuvering the Canadarm2 once the Cygnus is captured by Chris Williams. We also have VVO, or Visiting Vehicle Officer, who is monitoring the systems of Cygnus in addition to the team in Dulles, Virginia. And the entire team inside Mission Control Houston during today's shift is being led by Flight Director Heidi Brewer. Cygnus now 63 meters away from the International Space Station. You're looking at a view from inside the cupola.
Cease viewing Cygnus from all windows except cupola. And also for all crew, please be advised that the no exercise constraint will be extended until Cygnus capture, so please call Houston before beginning any exercise.
Copies. No viewing Cygnus except from cupola, and the exercise constraint remains in place until after capture.
Good readback.
And those words from Capcom, our capsule communicator Ever Zavalia, up to the crew on board the International Space Station as we continue to monitor the approach of the Cygnus spacecraft, now 59 meters away from Space Station. One of the callouts you heard was for a no exercise constraint. As mentioned, the crew on board Space Station exercises for about 2 hours per day to maintain their bone and muscle health. However, there are brief periods during dynamic operations, such as today's cargo capture of the Cygnus spacecraft, where the crew does not exercise. This is just a safety precaution to limit any loads from being imparted on the space station. We're getting a really great view here on our screen of the Cygnus spacecraft, now 56 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close in. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is prime and ready to capture Cygnus once it reaches the 10 to 12 meter hold point. We're just about 4 minutes away from Cygnus reaching the 30-meter point at which we'll have a hold. We are in a brief handover between our tracking and data relay satellites, and we do have views back. From time to time, we do lose views of the International Space Station, but do regain those once we get back on a satellite.
In Station 2, Block Bravo. On monitors 1 and 3, the lights within the corridor, the vehicle size matches the outline. The light on monitor 1 appears to be offset by about an eighth of a vehicle length aft of the circle. Monitor 3 appears to be aligned. Circle is spot on the corridor center in both.
Houston copies, and that matches expectations.
Continuing to get good call-outs as the crew on board the International Space Station monitors Cygnus's approach. We are now 48 meters away and closing in. Our next major milestone will be once Cygnus reaches the 30-meter mark. We'll complete a hold at this point, and this will be the final hold before Cygnus will make its way to the 10 to 12-meter point and will be captured by the Canadarm2. And if you're just joining us, we're continuing to bring you live coverage of the arrival of a cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station. This Cygnus spacecraft launched from Florida on Saturday at 6:41 a.m. Central Time with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, hardware, and research supplies for the Expedition 74 crew aboard the International Space Station. Cygnus is now 42 meters away from the International Space Station, and we're looking ahead to when it reaches the 30-meter mark, at which point we will have a planned hold. This hold allows the team here in the room to assess Cygnus, ensure everything looks good before they get the go to continue for the approach, at which point Cygnus will continue its approach to the 10 to 12-meter point, where it will be ready for capture. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be prime for operating the Canadarm2 in order to capture Cygnus today. Cygnus is about 38 meters away from the International Space Station. We are in another brief handover period between our satellites, but will regain views and communication here shortly. The team in the room here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, currently being led by NASA Flight Director Heidi Brewer. And the voice that you have been hearing from here inside Mission Control up to the crew on board the space station is our Capcom, or capsule communicator. Today's Orbit 2 capsule communicator is Resupply. Everything continuing to look good this morning as we are standing by for the 30-meter hold. It's the planned hold for Cygnus. Cygnus continuing to close in, now at 33 meters away from the International Space Station. Will soon be at the 30-meter hold point. Standing by for 30-meter hold for the Cygnus XL spacecraft. And we did hear that we are in that 30-meter hold.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for Chris and Jack. Confirm 30-meter hold and set up for capture per step 6 in 1.102. And for your situational awareness, expect capture time to be 17:09 GMT.
Station copies.
And those words from Capcom Eversavalia up to NASA astronauts Chris Williams and Jack Hathaway, who are in the cupola, primed and ready for capture this morning. We did get confirmation that Cygnus has reached the 30-meter expected hold point. We are anticipating a capture time of 12:09 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, 1:09 p.m. Eastern. This is the second flight of the Cygnus XL spacecraft, a larger spacecraft with more room for science investigations, hardware.
Visiting vehicle mode is hold. We're at 30 meters, and we're going to leave the command lights on.
Houston copies all.
Again, this Cygnus XL has expanded capability for additional hardware and supplies. On board the Cygnus XL spacecraft today is over 11,000 pounds of hardware, research, food, science investigations, and more. This 30-meter hold that we are currently in is the final hold before Cygnus will continue to make its way to the 10 to 12-meter point once given the go from the team here on the ground, following their analysis of the systems on board Cygnus. the International Space Station and Cygnus are currently flying 266 statute miles over Saskatchewan in Canada. As we continue through this planned 30-meter hold, let's take a quick look at some of the science and research experiments that will be conducted during Expedition 74 and 75 due to the arrival of this Cygnus XL spacecraft. This includes a new module to advance quantum science that could improve computing technology and aid in the search for dark matter. And there you do see on your screen that research experiment that is on board Cygnus. Additionally, there is hardware to produce a greater number of therapeutic stem cells for blood diseases and cancer, which could improve our understanding of diseases back here on Earth. Cygnus also carries model organisms to study the gut microbiome, as well as a receiver that could enhance space weather models to protect critical space infrastructure such as GPS and radar. We do expect to hear the call out that Cygnus has the go to resume its operations following the assessment by the team here on the ground. And we are getting some live views of Cygnus back. As you can see, it's continuing that planned 30-meter hold. Cygnus is continuing its planned 30-meter hold. We're getting a great view of the Cygnus XL spacecraft with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, hardware, and science research on board. You also see a view of the symbol-shaped ultraflex solar arrays on board Cygnus. We are expecting capture to occur at 12:09 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, 1:09 p.m. Eastern. Another great view of Cygnus there, as well as the Canadarm 2. The Canadarm 2 will be operated by NASA astronaut Chris Williams, with NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway serving as backup. They're both primed and ready inside the International Space Station's cupola. And here's a view from inside the International Space Station's cupola on the monitor that is being utilized by NASA astronauts Chris Williams and Jack Hathaway as they monitor the approach of Cygnus. Continuing that planned 30-meter hold. Cygnus and the International Space Station flying 266 statute miles over Quebec in Canada and approaching the coast of Maine in the United States. The International Space Station orbits the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour and has been continuously crewed for over 25 years and has seen over 290 individuals representing 26 countries and 5 international partners visiting the space station in that time. Continuing to get some great views of Cygnus as it flies 266 statute miles over Nova Scotia. The International Space Station can be seen from the Earth as it flies overhead. If you're interested in seeing when the International Space Station flies overhead, you can download our app, Spot the Station, or check out our website at nasa.gov/spot the station in order to find out when the space station will be orbiting overhead. And continuing to get some really stunning views of the Cygnus XL spacecraft as it holds at the planned 30-meter mark. Teams on the ground are continuing to assess the systems on board Cygnus and ensure everything looks good before they get the go for Cygnus to continue its approach, at which point it will approach to the 10 to 12 meter point. And NASA astronaut Chris Williams will utilize the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple or grab the Cygnus spacecraft.
Visuals configured. Just wanted to confirm the call in step 3.2 that crew is ready for Cygnus approaching to the capture point.
And Houston Station 2, we are just finishing up our capture briefing, and we'll be there in a minute or so.
Houston copies.
Houston Station, crew is ready for Cygnus approach to capture point in step 3.2.
Copy, standby 1. And for Chris and Jack, what we're seeing on telemetry down here for your monitor 1 does not match what we see in the procedure in step 3.1. Can you confirm S1 lower outboard plus 90 plus 65? And if you have a good view from P1 lower outboard, I guess that the settings that you have right now should suffice.
Yeah, station copies. We'll reconfigure those.
And those words from Capcom Eversavalia up to the crew on board the International Space Station as they continue to monitor the approach of Cygnus. It remains in the 30-meter hold. The team on the ground just double-checking numbers for the crew inside the cupola as they monitor the approach of the Cygnus spacecraft. After taking a look, it appeared the numbers didn't quite line up, so the crew on board the International Space Station is going to reconfigure those numbers, and the team here on the ground will confirm that everything looks good before we continue the approach to the 10 to 12 meter point. And this is a live view from the cupola where NASA astronauts Chris Williams and Jack Hathaway are monitoring the approach of Cygnus. You can see some of the exterior of the International Space Station there on the lower portion of their screen, including the solar arrays in the middle of the screen that they're looking at, and just behind, in front rather, of the solar array is the Canadarm2, which will be utilized to capture Cygnus today.
Copy all. Yep, and we are ready for sketch point.
Copy and concur. Standby 1. Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Chris and Jack. Cygnus is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Station copies.
And good news from the team here on the ground. Everything looking good for Cygnus to continue its approach following that planned and expected 30-meter hold. We are expecting the approach to resume here shortly.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Cygnus has resumed approach to the capture point. Monitor approach within 30 meters per step 7 in 1.102.
Station.
And with that, Cygnus is resuming its approach, now 28 meters away from the International Space Station and closing in to the 10 to 12 meter point, at which time NASA astronaut Chris Williams will operate the Canadarm in order to capture Cygnus.
Houston Houston Station, visiting vehicle mode is in approach. Prior range is 27 and decreasing. For Black Bravo, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is not offset from the circle, and the circle is pretty much on the center line. That's in Monitor 1, and Monitor 3 matches.
Houston copies, and that is what we expect. Thank you.
The Cygnus XL spacecraft, loaded with over 11,000 pounds of hardware, cargo, science research, food, and supplies for the crew on board the International Space Station, is now 23 meters away. This is the second launch of the Cygnus XL spacecraft, which carries about 33% more cargo to the International Space Station. Cygnus will remain at the space station until October, at which point it will harmlessly burn up in the Earth's atmosphere after being filled with trash. Cygnus continuing to close in, now 21 meters away. We're looking for Cygnus to be in the range of between 10 to 12 meters from the International Space Station, at which point NASA astronaut Chris Williams will operate the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple or grab the Cygnus spacecraft.
Station 2 for Block Bravo, no change.
Houston copies, no change for Block Bravo.
Cygnus continuing to close in, now 17 meters away from the International Space Station following its launch from Florida on Saturday at 6:41 a.m. Central. NASA's Northrop Grumman Commercial Resupply Service's 24 spacecraft is named in honor of NASA astronaut Stephen R. Nagel, who was selected by NASA in 1979 and is a veteran of 4 space flights and logged more than 723 hours in space. As you can see on your screen here, Cygnus really closing in, now at the 15-meter mark. We're expecting Cygnus to arrive to the capture point in less than 90 seconds. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is primed for operating the Canadarm2 for capture today.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for all crew. New capture time is expected to be at 17:19, and for your awareness, TRIDAR constraints are still in place. And for the USOS crew, obviously we will not be participating in the EDPC as scheduled. If we have any topics for you, we'll call after capture.
Station copies, USOS, no DPC.
We did hear a couple of callouts there from the Capcom Eversvalia up to the crew on board the International Space Station. First was that the capture time for Cygnus today has been adjusted slightly to 12:19 p.m. Central Time, 1:19 p.m. Eastern. You also heard some communications in reference to DPC. That stands for Daily Planning Conference. This is a time for the crew to just hear the latest from the team on the ground, look ahead towards tomorrow, any important communications that need to be relayed ahead of the next day, and it looks like they won't be needing to do one of those today. And we are at the hold point for the capture. Cygnus now 12 meters away from the International Space Station.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Chris and Jack. Confirm capture point hold for step 8 in 1.102.
Houston Station, our prior range is 12 and holding. Visiting vehicle mode has changed to CP hold. Our Cygnus command panel LED configuration is correct. The grapple fixture is stable. The dots within the outer corridor of the nested corridors, and there are no exceeding limits. We have good lighting conditions, and we're ready for Cygnus capture.
And Houston copies. That is a good report. Stand by for capture.
We're standing by for step 4.
And we did get good call-outs. Everything looking good for capture today. Chris Williams, prime for operating the Canadarm2. We may begin to see some motion of the Canadarm here shortly, as Cygnus is at the capture point, 12 meters away from the International Space Station. And we are standing by.
Houston on Space to Ground 2 for Christian Jack. Go for Cygnus capture sequence. Step 4 and 1.110 Cygnus capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Station copies will go in step 4 of 1.110. We'll be monitoring the backaway cue card.
And you just heard it, a go from the team here on the ground for capture of Cygnus. Chris Williams now utilizing the Canadarm2 in order to capture the Cygnus spacecraft after its launch from Florida yesterday with Saturday, with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, hardware, science research, and food for the crew aboard the International Space Station. And if you're just joining us, you're looking at a live view of a uncrewed Cygnus cargo resupply spacecraft. Cygnus is currently 12 meters away from the International Space Station and awaiting grapple by NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who will be operating the Canadarm2 today. We're just a few minutes away from our expected capture time at 12:19 p.m. Central, 1:19 p.m. Eastern. Everything continuing to look good here on the ground as we monitor the approach of Cygnus ahead of its capture by NASA astronaut Chris Williams. And we are beginning to see some motion by the Canadarm2 being operated by NASA astronaut Chris Williams from inside the space station's cupola. This is something that crew members train for ahead of their flights to the International Space Station. Canadarm now 3.5 meters away from Cygnus. Two and a half meters, Williams continuing to utilize the Canadarm2 to close in on Cygnus with over 11,000 pounds of cargo, hardware, science research, and food for the crew aboard the International Space Station. .5 meters and closing in. .1 meter. And capture confirmed. Cygnus captured at 12:20 p.m. Central while flying over the South Atlantic Ocean west of Africa. You're looking at a live view of the Cygnus spacecraft following its capture just seconds ago by NASA astronaut Chris Williams operating the Canadarm2 while inside the space station's cupola. At this point, a series of latches are working to connect Cygnus to the Canadarm2. And we did hear confirmation that the final latches that connect Cygnus to the Canadarm2 were successfully secured.
Houston Station, Cygnus capture is complete. SS Steve Nagel, welcome aboard the ISS. This mission is bringing 11,000 pounds of supplies and science experiments to our orbiting laboratory, enabling us to continue our work for the benefit of all. We would like to pass our deepest thanks and congratulations to the teams on the ground at NASA, SpaceX, Northrop Grumman that have worked together to make this mission a reality.
The vehicle is named in honor of Steve Nagel, a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and a NASA astronaut. He joined NASA in 1979 and was a veteran of 4 space shuttle flights, logging 723 hours in space. He retired from the astronaut office in 1995, but continued on as a research pilot in our aircraft operations division, where he helped train astronauts in the T-38 as well as in the shuttle training aircraft, including several active members of our astronaut corps. He was a true professional, and those who worked and flew with him remember his kindness, patience, and positivity. We are proud to celebrate and be a part of his legacy. Go for Cygnus post-capture reconfiguration.
And Houston copies Cygnus capture complete. Great job, Chris and Jack, and great job by the entire NG-24 team. And copy, we are go for Cygnus post-capture reconfiguration.
And we just heard some nice words from NASA astronauts Chris Williams, who captured the SSR Stephen R. Nagel this morning, as well as NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, who are both in the cupola welcoming Cygnus aboard the International Space Station, captured at 12:20 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. And now that capture is complete, controls will be handed over to teams on the ground in Houston, who will move Cygnus into position to be berthed to the Unity module of the International Space Station. Today, Cygnus was captured at 12:20 p.m. Central Time by NASA astronaut Chris Williams, with NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway backing him up. Following capture by the Canadarm2, controls will be handed over to the team on the ground, who will later use the Canadarm2 to reposition Cygnus and bring it to the station's Unity module, where it will be installed later today. With the successful capture of Cygnus today, that is going to wrap up our coverage. As a recap, the SS Stephen R. Nagel launched at 6:41 a.m. Central on Saturday, April 11th, was captured at 12:20 p.m. Central today by NASA astronaut Chris Williams using the space station's robotic arm. Thank you for joining us for today's capture of NASA's Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft to the International Space Station. Following capture, Cygnus will be berthed or installed to the station's Unity module, and we will provide an update on the space station blog with the latest following that operation. You can follow along with everything happening on the International Space Station, which has been continuously crewed for over 25 years, by checking out our space station blog, where daily updates on the crew and what they are working on are shared. And you can also follow along on social media at ISS on Instagram and at space_station on X. But for now, that will do it for us here today. This is Mission Control Houston.